Actually, while you get your notes together, I wanted to say something.
You do? Okay. Yeah, go.
I could just, why me, why now, why here? I've just come back from Ghana, and I go, yay, yay. I go every year. So I take NYU scholars to Ghana every year, sophomore scholars. And it's really an honor and a privilege. So I lived there in 2013 with my child. She was 6 years old. And at that time, we used to hail a taxi cab. And she would ask me, why would we not be able to get a taxi cab? Why would they always go for somebody else who looked like different from us? And this worried me. And I knew that I needed to get her out of this country for a minute to breathe. I am the child of colonial subjects. My mother's from Venezuela, my dad's from Trinidad. And I remember growing up and going to Trinidad at some point and asking my mother, why did you take us from here? Why did you take us to the United States? And she couldn't answer the question, but I think somewhere deep inside, she knew that we were a traveling people historically, and we needed to travel. And I guess years later, I would look at my 6-year-old daughter and know that it was time to travel. And I took her to Ghana, and I taught at NYU, Accra, and University of Ghana for a year. And what I got back was my child, who loved herself and was loved and saw her beauty in her darkness. And so as I look out in the audience today, I want to just kind of shout out and give some appreciation there. My journey now actually is not only to take NYU students to Ghana, but to take friends, family, people who want to know to Ghana, to journey and continue the journey and the connection. And I mentor a lot of young West Africans. Actually, I mentor a lot of children of the continent. And one of them who I've mentored, who's still there and he does these trips with me, I was asking him, he thinks a lot and he thinks deeply about darkness. When we think about Africa as a continent, we think about it as the dark continent, the mythical, the unknown. But I also think of it in terms of dark bodies. And he was having this meditation, Noble Nizar, on darkness. And I just wanted to offer it to everyone sitting here today. He said, we live in an era where darkness has been demonized and light is eulogized. But sometimes, like a flesh wound that must be wrapped in a bandage, we need darkness to heal and grow. Before a seed needs light to photosynthesize, it must be buried deep in the earth where it is covered in darkness. Even after germination, the roots stay in the dark. And so I just want to really give a meditation and a nod to the meditation on darkness and the beauty and the need of darkness in this space.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, this is Dr. Renee Blake. Dr. Renee Blake uses she, her, and ella pronouns. She's an associate professor in the departments of linguistics and social and cultural analysis here at NYU, with affiliations in the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, or CLACS, and the Department of Anthropology. She's a founding member of the Center for the Study of Africa and the African Diaspora, and she is an associate professor of and contributor to the Emmy Award-winning film Talking Black in America, and serves as the producer for the Emmy-nominated Talking Black in America Roots, currently showing on PBS. At NYU, she is the lead faculty member for the Presidential Sophomore Scholars Program, and as she's mentioned, with a focus on Accra, Ghana. She is also the co-founder of the United Solutions Consultancy Group, a global firm specializing in DEI and belonging work. She has 30 years of experience working as a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging consultant with large foundations, law firms, tech companies, nonprofit boards, communities, and individuals. She's highly trained, respected sociolinguistic research scholar, specializing in language, behavior, and society surrounding issues of race, ethnicity, age, sex, and gender, and more recently, language fairness in the AI space. Her quantitative and qualitative work has been published in several professional journals and books, and she regularly does public interfacing around language in society. Dr. Blake holds a Doctor of Philosophy in Linguistics, a Master of Science in Linguistics, and a Bachelor of Science in Biology, all from Stanford University. She has also studied at the University per Straniere de Perugia. See, okay, that yeah. I was going to say yes. All right, in Italy, and was a National Science, Foundation Awarded Scholar at the University of Amsterdam and a Fulbright Scholar at the University of the West Indies, Barbados. And she is the recipient of numerous other awards and accolades, and a terrific partner to the office, a wonderful professor,
Thank you.
mentor to our students, and just an all-around terrific person to work with here at NYU. So thank you, Dr. Blake. So we're going to talk a little bit now, and just I have some questions for you, as I've said, and they, of course, I'm continuing to shout out my students because they prepared the questions as well. So thank you, Agochi and Deborah. So as an associate professor and contributor, as we just talked about, to Emmy-winning films, Talking Black in America, could you share with us some of the experiences that shaped you and your contributions to film and to other scholarly areas?
Oh, okay, thank you. So I grew up in the film industry. My mother was a very well-known producer, and so for me, that was very second nature. She was the executive producer to Spike Lee's first kind of big film. And so for me, that was a normal kind of rhythm in my life. But I think I was also that young person who was in search of knowledge, history, and identity. So in high school, I was like one of the founders of the Black Students Association. That's back in the day, right? And when I got to college, I was one of the founders of the Caribbean Students Association at Stanford, right? And so for me, it's always been the journey of finding home. You know, Chris Rock talks about if he knew what his history was, the person he would have become. Now, we all think of Chris Rock and we're like, you're amazing, you're great, right? But for him, it was like my ancestors were great teachers and knowers and contributors to society, right? And so I think it's really important for me, it's been this kind of searching and knowing. And it comes through language. And so that is my journey, right? And so Talking Black in America Roots was a linguistic journey, but it's also a personal journey. And I think it's a personal journey for anybody I come in contact with.
And if you haven't seen the film, please check it out. It's a wonderful film. We've screened it here at NYU. And so let's talk a little bit about this work that you're doing in Accra. And so you've done a lot of work in Accra. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk to us a little bit about some of the general work you've done? And then also, so it's a three-part question, the general work you've done, the work, expand on talking to us a little bit about the work that you've done with students.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then lastly, talk to us about some of the work that you're doing now, you know, taking your family and others, and some of the work you've done with girls and women.
Okay. So my work with Accra actually starts a long time ago with the Ford Foundation. And so I worked with a program called Africa Exchange. I was the ethnographer. And so what I did there is I was really interested in what happened with collaborations in the arts across African organizations and American organizations. So I started to document that process. As I continued having opportunities to go to Accra, and I was taking students there, it was to give them an experience. But let me just tell y'all something. So y'all are all sitting here of African descent, right? And every year, students have a choice in CAS, College of Arts and Sciences at NYU, to sign up to go to Accra, to go to the continent. And it is the section that is the least signed up for, okay? So people going to Europe, 50 and 60 people. This year I have 13 students. And so every year I'm like, why is it that I have to re-educate people on the richness of our continent? So the students who are of African descent say, I'll get there one day. I'm going to go with my family, so I'll wait. Even though they haven't been there, some of them haven't been there since they were born. Or they'll say, my parents promised to take me, so I'm going to wait for my parents, right? And so for me, it's that desire to educate, to know, to be closer to, and that's why I take people, right? So my work is first to show people the continent and the vastness, the richness, the brilliance of the continent, the youth of the continent, the variety of it. And so it's first to see, it is to experience. We go into communities, we do work in communities, we find where is our connection to community. You know, oftentimes in Ghana, people say we don't have money, and it's interesting we talk about growing economies, but the ways that so many people don't have access to that. And so we go into communities where they talk about we don't have money, but we have our children. And what that means then for students to come into those spaces. So the first thing is my work in Ghana is to first show students and let them see. The other thing is to have students have access to Ghanaian students as well. So we go to the University of Ghana. We go to the archives. We go and talk to other Ghanaians. We party with party with Ghanaians and other West Africans who are in Ghana. We talk about the politics. We think about Nkrumah. We think about the connection between Nkrumah and Martin Luther King, right? And if you're from the Caribbean, right, we start thinking about those connections. So we are creating diasporic connections. That's the work that I'm doing with our students. And then we start thinking about research projects. What can we do in terms of diasporic research projects? So for instance, at NYU, we have students doing film, documentary film, for the past 15 years, but we have no archive of it. So already, here we have a growing archive that's not even being brought together. So we're thinking about how do we pull that archive together of work done by undergraduate students that give us historical memory and have us understand how the continent has changed over time, right? How Ghana has changed over time and communities have changed. So we do that work. And then we start thinking about grad students. What projects are here, right? What projects are here in terms of healthcare, in terms of language and language change and contact. You know, students go to Ghana and they are like, oh, I love it here because they speak English, right? But there's so many languages being spoken. Most students in Ghana are polyglots. They speak in 5 languages. And English is their lingua franca to communicate across the shared languages, right? And then they hear a pidgin, a Ghanaian pidgin. And they're like, wait, this isn't in the market. This is at the university. A Ghanaian pidgin in many parts of the world are for the poor, for the working class. But this is being used by the children of the elite, right? So why is that? That's a study, right? It actually marks an elite status. So this is the kind of stuff that I'm trying to get students to think through. I have been in the natural sciences, I've been in the social sciences, and for me, the humanities, it's that we can find research and collaboration across space and across time.
Thank you. And will you talk a little bit about some of the work you've done with girls and women? They asked me to ask you that.
Girls and women. It's so interesting you ask me about that. And I want to just share with you, do any of you know in Ghana, when you think about Ghana, there's a school called Achimota. And that is where I think all but one of the leaders of Ghana was educated. And these are all men. So if you think about the continent, you have 54 nations. Right now, how many of those nations are led by women? How many? Guess. 4, 3, 2. right? And where might they be? Tanzania, Ethiopia, okay? And so for me, I want to keep asking the questions of where are the girls and where are the women? It's so interesting because even as African diasporic subjects and peoples, we often don't even know about our own continent, right? And people will ask me, like I was going this year to take young women to Ghana, and the biggest concern was, should we go? Because it's so close to Niger. And I'm looking at your faces, and that no one's saying, what? What? And I was like, what? And what it showed me is, number one, they didn't know where Niger was. They had to go through some other countries. Right? Yeah. Well, I didn't tell you that some said Niger, some said Niger, some said the N-word, what is it, Nigeria, close. And so there are all kinds of things there. But I think it's important to recognize, again, this knowledge of that we need to try to have as well around the continent. So the work with women, before I talk about the work with women, I want to say this. Dr. James Agre, who was the first assistant principal at Achimota, said, the surest way to keep a people down is to educate the men and neglect the women. If you educate a man, you simply educate an individual. But if you educate a woman, you educate a family and a nation. So the work that I do in Ghana when I'm teaching, it is to give young women opportunities and possibilities and to see possibilities for themselves, whether it is someone like a Judith Boateng who need to be supported around the archives at University of Ghana, or whether it is young women who are cooking in Ghana and want to start a business where they teach young people coming from the United States and the Western world how to make jollof rice, and so therefore supporting the start of businesses. Or two young women here, age 32, who started 57 Chocolate. We're talking about Kimberly and Priscilla Addison, giving them an opportunity to be seen so that we see the work that they're doing. These are young women who have founded 57 Chocolate, 57 being, what is 57 for those of you who are from Ghana? 1957 is what? Independence, right? So they named their chocolates that. And what they're doing is thinking about how do you harvest cocoa, right, to create chocolate coming out of Ghana, as opposed to people thinking that chocolate and cocoa comes from where? Europe, Switzerland and Europe, right? And so the work that I do is to support young women who are trying to create business and to support them through having other people of the diaspora see and interact with them and bring them together.
Thank you so much. So we have, sure, some inspiring leaders in the audience. And so what would you say to some people who are in leadership positions as they navigate both difficulty and opportunity?
Yeah. I think the difficulty is real. And I want to acknowledge that. It's very difficult. I've seen young women of African descent, young African women go back home after getting educated around the world, and then they go back to those places where they were educated because they don't necessarily see a place for opportunity. So I think it's important to recognize that collaboration is critical, communication is critical, connection is critical. The amount of young women from the continent who sit in my class and don't say anything astounds me. And I'm like, no, you're going to say something. You have a right to ask me a question. And so for me, it's practice, practice, practice. And if you feel nervous and you feel anxious or you feel tired or you have something else on your mind, know that today is another opportunity to practice having connection, to making connection. to seeing opportunity and possibility, to ask for help. And so I think oftentimes we don't realize we can do that. And so I see my role as doing that. So I think, number one, it's hard. Number two, there are possibilities. Number three, money is critical, but you gotta start somewhere and you need to start.
Thank you. And we are going to open it up to questions after this question. So what would your 8-year-old self, so this question comes from a very dear friend of mine asked me at some point in my life, what would my 8-year-old self and then what would my 15-year-old self, they had these markers. So the question that we're asking you today is, what would your 8-year-old self think of yourself today?
I don't remember my 8-year-old self.
You can say 10.
I remember my 13-year-old self.
13, go with 13.
I remember my 13-year-old self because I was in New York looking at my Caribbean parents and thinking, I'm going to have to take care of them. That this was a country that I didn't think would be kind to them as they aged. And so my 13-year-old self would think of me now as, you understood the assignment. You understood the assignment to care, to love, and to make critical choices to take care of not just your parents, but people who looked like them, experienced like them. And for me, that was really the African diaspora and everything connected to that. And I think I want to make one other point clear, and that is, the one thing I always say to students is, we are the African diaspora in this room, and every single person in this world is connected to us, whether they want to or not. When you journey with me, you understand you are part of this assignment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Blake. So we have, I think, a few minutes for questions. So we have a question right here, and you can use my mic.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you both for that introduction. Now, I just want to say I'm originally from Bermuda, and my father is Bermudian, and my mother's American. So when I lived here, you know how you start questioning like certain things are not adding up. What makes sense? Okay, especially when I moved back to Bermuda. It was in my gut feeling. So now that I'm going through this, we call it a human revolution in Buddhism, where you have to go through an inner transformation because there's a lot of unlearning that I have to do. Because a lot of things that was passed down to me was not correct. I don't care if it was religion, eating habits, ideas around money, relationships, name the ABC 1, 2, 3s. It's very questionable. So my question to you, because you're talking about this Black collective, we're talking about the generation coming up behind us. Now they're gonna have to prepare themselves because it's an undertaking. The narrative starts from within. Let's start from right there. What process are they gonna have to undergo in order to make this a reality? Because I see what's happening in Niger. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this country correctly, Bafuna Fasana? Okay. South Africa. There's a lot of uprising. So, but they're gonna need help. But it's not gonna come from within the system. It's gonna have to come from outside the system. And it's also gonna have to come from an entrepreneurial perspective. Like you said, you touched on that, because I don't see anything changing from a 9-to-5 perspective when you go to work. You know, we have all this education, but I don't see anything changing. No one's happy at their job. So my question to you is, what is the internal undergoing that they're gonna have to go through so they're gonna prepare themselves mentally and be able to sustain it, because it's gonna take time. And time it's not linear, meaning that it's not gonna take 20 years, you're just gonna have to stick to it. So what advice would you give to the ones coming up, the generation coming up behind us?
Thank you for your question. So I teach young people, And most people come to my class and they're looking for a set syllabus. And I have a set syllabus because that's what I'm supposed to do. But I do think the work that I do is deeply the work of yourself, the individual, transformation of the self. I actually don't think revolution and change happens on the outside. I think it first happens on the inside. I think that's the work to first be done. Deep healing work that has to be done. And I think that's where I start teaching from and I start working with students from. But I want to make it very clear that young people and their hearts and their spirits, while across seas and lands they are different people, the capacity of their heart, I think, is the same. And so what young people sitting in this room here today and young people sitting in Ghana today must go through, I think there's some similarities there. It looks slightly different, but I think there are some similarities. And there's a yearning to transform and heal and to be together. And so what I would say to them is to recognize that the answer is not out there, and that it is deeply within your core, and that to find people who are supportive of, yes, your external growth, but also your internal transformation and centering and anchoring. And I think there are many women, Lisa, you being one of them, who are there to help support that anchoring. Not only are the people sitting here the future, but they are also the future, they will create the future as well. The women in here who make a decision to give birth will birth not only women, but also men of the future. And so this is not only about women. This is about women and men because they are birthed, right, from the very people who are sitting in this room. And they will be raised by all of us. So it is, I think, a very individual journey, but I think it's also connective. But the work, I think, the transformation starts inside.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up on something that Derek said earlier, and it's exactly what you said, Renee. We have to learn to love ourselves so that we can love one another across the diaspora. We have to recognize and see ourselves in one another, and sometimes we see ourselves as distinct and separate and in competition, and we have to see ourselves through love, compassion, and collectivity.
Oh, this is the practice.
A question and then a comment. A quick question is the movement from the Caribbean to the Americas, to North America, and then to Africa is an interesting dance. Mm-hmm. And I want to hear more about that because we a lot of us fret about going back home, which is what you just mentioned, because it's unknown, it's been described already. And because we're already described, then we don't have a way to say, no, that's not who we really are. We are very many things. So I want you to redescribe that particular self in you and in the continent and in the Americas. A quick comment would be that a lot of this conversation has happened already. We've been conversing about Africa a lot of times, yeah? We've talked about Africa in many ways. What is new about this particular conversation, and why do we have to have another conversation about Africa, is a question that is being levied by everybody globally. We've had your concern. You have not done anything about it. So what?
You want me to have the answer to that? All I know is this. There's a T-shirt right now going around, I grew up saying Trini to the bone, right? So I was a Trini to the bone, right? That's Trinidad is in me. But I think it's even another t-shirt for me is Africa is born in me. And for me, it's undeniable. But I think what was the pivotal point for me and why am I traveling to Ghana and not Trinidad and not Venezuela? And I will go to all of those places in Europe. I still go to all of those places. But why Ghana? It has to do with a 16-year-old girl. It has to do with a 16-year-old girl that when she gets off that plane, she says, I am beautiful. I am worthy. I am loved. I am seen. And there is something as a parent that is undeniable for me. And so for me, I get to see her face in every single one of these people sitting in this room. And I get to come back and say, you are worthy, and you're beautiful, and you're loved, and you have a right to ask a question, and to thrive, and to be supported. For me, that's the connection. That is the diaspora connection. And I have to go to Ghana. I have to go to the continent to get refortified, to get gassed up, so that I can do that work. There's something about the vibration that allows me to do that work.
Please give a round of applause.